So today we are covering section 18.2, and we're going to be talking about long-term debt financing. The difference between today and yesterday we focused on short-term financing options, and really the big difference between short-term and long-term is with short-term financing we intend to pay back that debt within a year's time. And for long-term, this is going to require a longer period of time to pay back. More than a year is generally how we separate short-term and long-term. And not only that, but this type of financing is used because we're dealing with more money. This type of financing is used to help us acquire what we would call plant assets, big ticket items like machinery, equipment, it could be property, buildings, things that are going to be needed for us to expand our operations. So with that said, we're going to look at basically two journal entries to acquire the financing, and then what do we do then when it's paid back. And so total of 4 entries, 2 different acquisitions of the debt, and then how do we pay those 2 types of debt back. And so that's going to be the lesson, pretty short. So we're on page 568. No, we're not. We're on page 564. That's where the work together 18.2 problem is, and in your workbook it's page 7. So let's just get started with that June the 1st transaction, which is telling us that we are signing a 5-year 9% note valued at $25,000. So that's going to go in the cash receipts journal. We basically have acquired $25,000. That will be our debit to cash, and the credit is to set up this liability. So let's go ahead and put in our date. It's June the 1st. And the liability, since it's a 5-year note, more than a year, we're going to call this long-term notes payable. And you see the document number there is R337. We won't have to worry about the post reference. We won't be doing any posting today. And so we're going to credit this liability for $5,000. I'm sorry, $25,000. And the debit to cash for the same amount. Okay, and that takes care of June the 1st. All right, let's work on the July the 1st. On July the 1st, it's a different type of financing. This time we're issuing bonds. So the idea behind bonds is we sell bonds to people who are interested, and then these are long-term. People that buy bonds keep them for many, many years, and then at the end of the bond term, they get their money back plus interest. I don't know if anybody has ever invested in government bonds, government savings bonds. Maybe you've had those purchased for you. But the idea is you buy them, say, for $50 a piece. And the way government bonds work, if you buy a $50 bond, it will become $100 usually at the end of about 15 years or something like that. The interest rates vary. But it's a good way to save some money. And so we're offering this bond issue. Sometimes churches do this to finance a building, a new auditorium. They'll sell bonds to the public. They'll get that money, and in 20 years they know that they're going to have to pay back all of that money plus interest to all those people that bought their bonds. Okay, so on July the 1st, let's put our date in there again, 2017, July 1. This is going to be, the liability is going to be called bonds payable. And this bond issue was for a total of $200,000. So we credit that liability, and then we debit cash. Okay, so there's two different ways that we gained money. Now, again, it's money that obviously will have to be paid back over time, but it allowed us to acquire some capital, and that's why we call this debt financing. Tomorrow, we're going to look at another type of financing called equity financing, and that's where we sell shares of our company stock. All right, so we've set up these two liabilities. Now the next two entries will be when we start paying them back. Okay, so let's look at the December the 1st. So now we're going to be going down to the cash payments journal, and on December the 1st, we are told we paid cash for the December payment on the note payable. Okay, and it was $518.96. Okay, so that monthly payment that you we're given this, you might call this an amortization schedule. It's a way to keep up with how much principal is still owed. With every payment, this is kind of interesting. If you, one of these days when you buy a house or a car, you can keep up with how much each of your payments, in this case our monthly payment is $518.96. Well, in this first payment, only $331.46 of that payment actually reduced the principal. $187.50 of that payment just paid the interest. So over time, each of our payments should pay a little bit more off of the principal. Principal means this original amount that's been borrowed, the $25,000. So it's when you buy a house, it's kind of depressing, especially if it's a 30-year loan. You might make a $1,000 a month house payment, and it may only pay off, depending on the interest rate, it may only pay off about $150 on the principal on that very first payment. Now you got to think you're making, if it's a 30-year loan, you're making 360 payments on your house. So in the very beginning, you're paying off a lot of interest. And these financial institutions want their money first. And then as you get to near the end of the term, then you're really paying off a lot of principal. You've paid the interest off early with your payments. And then in years 20, 25, 30, closer to the end, you're paying a big chunk of principal at that point. So you can kind of see that here with this schedule. Notice how when we get down to the 9th payment, we're paying $351.88 of our principal, about $20 more from the first payment. So anyway, our journal entry then is we're going to debit the liability, long-term notes payable. And that's check number 842. Okay, and we're making the December payment, right? So looking at this December payment, we're going to only pay $344.08 off of the actual principal amount, the actual amount that we owed. So we're going to debit the payable for $344.08. That number there. So you can probably guess what our other debit is going to be. we paid a total of $518.96. If $344.08 paid off the loan, what did the other go to? Yeah, so our other debit is going to be to interest expense. And that's $174.88. And those together will be our credit to cash, which is our monthly payment, $518.96. Sound good? Any questions on that? Okay, yeah. Oh, thanks. Thank you. My book's covered up with my pad. What's the journal page for the cash receipts? 6. And what's the other one? Good. Thank you for reminding me. All right. Well, let's see. We got one more entry. We're at the end of the year, and we have to pay interest on this bond issue twice a year. So we're going to do a little calculation here. I don't know if you have your calculator handy. So it says paid cash for the semi-annual interest on the bonds. Okay. So how do we come up with that interest amount? Okay, we take the bond liability amount. If you look back on our July the 1st, these were at 6%, and we're doing half a year basically, so 180 divided by 360. So what is that? 6,000? Okay. So hopefully you did get $6,000. So our entry then to record that semi-annual interest is the debit to interest expense. And that's check number 861 for $6,000 and credit cash. And that's it. That is lesson 18.2. So take a few minutes and do the on your own 18.2 and then the application 18.2, and that will wrap up today.